Grady Demond Wilson, born on October 13th, 1946, and passing peacefully on January 30th, 2026, lived a life shaped by purpose, discipline, and faith rather than fame alone. While generations remember him best as Lamont Sanford, the thoughtful and grounded son on NBC's Sanford and Son from 1972 to 1977, that role was only one chapter in a much larger story. Wilson was many things across his lifetime: an actor, author, soldier, minister, husband, and father, each role carrying equal weight in how he understood success. His estimated net worth of $2.5 million reflected decades of steady work in entertainment and ministry, yet he often spoke about wealth in quieter terms. To him, fulfillment meant integrity, service, and leaving people better than he found them. His life balanced humor and hardship, public recognition and private conviction, forming a legacy rooted in character rather than celebrity. Georgia roots and a New York awakening, Wilson was born in Valdosta, Georgia, but his creative identity was shaped after his family moved to New York City during his childhood. The city's energy, diversity, and constant motion opened his eyes early to the power of performance and storytelling. Remarkably, by the age of 4, he appeared on a Broadway stage, an early sign of the discipline and confidence that would follow him throughout life. Dance became his first language of expression, and he trained seriously in tap and ballet, learning structure, timing, and grace long before most children understood commitment. At just 12 years old, Wilson performed at Harlem's Apollo Theater, a venue rich with cultural meaning and artistic history. Standing on that stage did not inflate his ego, but quietly affirmed his sense of belonging. Those formative experiences instilled humility alongside ambition, grounding his dreams in respect for craft and community, rather than applause alone. Early faith and a defining moment of fragility. Faith was present in Wilson's life from an early age, woven gently but persistently into his upbringing. Raised Catholic, he served as an altar boy and briefly considered the priesthood, drawn to ideas of service and moral responsibility. His summers with his Pentecostal grandmother, Ada Mitchell, introduced him to expressive worship and deepened his spiritual curiosity. At 13, a ruptured appendix brought him dangerously close to death, forcing a sudden confrontation with mortality at a young age. During that frightening period, Wilson made a private promise to God, vowing to serve him in some meaningful way if his life was spared. Though he recovered and continued pursuing entertainment, that vow stayed with him quietly, shaping his conscience rather than redirecting his path immediately. The experience taught him humility and gratitude, reminding him that talent alone was fragile without purpose. It was a moment that planted seeds he would nurture later in life. Military service and the weight of survival. From 1966 to 1968, Wilson served in the United States Army as part of the 4th Infantry Division during the Vietnam War, an experience that permanently altered his understanding of life. Military service exposed him to fear, loss, and discipline on a scale far removed from theater stages and rehearsal halls. He was wounded in combat, returning home with both visible and invisible scars that took years to process. Rather than allowing those experiences to harden him, Wilson gradually transformed them into sources of empathy and strength. The war taught him the value of patience, perspective, and restraint, qualities that later defined his most famous performances. When he returned to civilian life, he found solace in the arts, channeling unspoken emotions into Broadway and off-Broadway productions. Acting became a form of healing, allowing him to express what words could not. Those years deepened his humanity and reinforced his respect for life, service, and peace. finding his footing in film and television. Wilson's transition from stage to screen happened gradually, built on preparation rather than overnight success. He earned guest roles on popular television shows such as Mission, Impossible, and All in the Family, where his calm presence made lasting impressions even in brief appearances. Film opportunities followed, including roles in The Organization in 1971 and Dealing, or the Berkeley to Boston 40-brick Lost Bag Blues in 1972. These early screen performances refined his understated style, proving he did not rely on exaggeration to command attention. Directors and audiences alike noticed his ability to convey sincerity and restraint, qualities that set him apart during an era of larger-than-life performances. Each project prepared him for a defining opportunity he could not yet see coming. By the early 1970s, Wilson had developed the confidence, discipline, and emotional depth necessary for a role that would forever connect him to television history. That role arrived sooner than expected and changed everything, becoming Lamont Sanford and television history. In 1971, Wilson was cast as Lamont Sanford on Sanford and Son, a role that would define his public image while revealing his deepest strengths as an actor. Portraying the patient, principled son to Red Fox's loud and lovable Fred Sanford, Wilson became the emotional anchor of the series. His chemistry with Fox felt natural and unforced, blending humor with warmth in a way that resonated across generations. Lamont was not just a comedic counterpart, but a moral compass, grounding the show's chaos with quiet dignity. When Fox temporarily left the series in 1974 due to contract disputes, Wilson unexpectedly carried the show as its central figure, doing so with professionalism and grace. Though the situation left personal disappointment, he chose not to dwell in resentment. Instead, he focused on the work, honoring the audience and the character. The result was a performance remembered for balance, heart, and authenticity. Life after the sitcom and creative persistence. After Sanford and Son concluded in 1977, Wilson continued working steadily, determined not to be confined by a single role. He starred in the CBS sitcom Baby I'm Back and later took on the challenging role of Oscar Madison in ABC's The New Odd Couple from 1982 to 1983, opposite Ron Glass as Felix. These projects allowed him to explore different rhythms of comedy and character dynamics. Over the years, he also appeared in films such as Full Moon High, Me and the Kid, and Hammerlock, demonstrating a willingness to adapt and evolve with the industry. While none of these roles matched the cultural impact of Lamont Sanford, Wilson viewed them as opportunities to grow rather than measures of relevance. His approach remained consistent: show up prepared, respect the craft, and contribute meaningfully. For him, longevity mattered more than headlines, and steady work reflected quiet success. Writing, reflection, and a turn toward ministry. As Wilson matured, writing became an important extension of his voice, offering space for reflection beyond performance. Grounded in his Christian faith, he wrote thoughtfully about spirituality, encouraging discernment and personal responsibility rather than fear or division. His 1998 book, New Age Millennium, reflected his concern for clarity and truth, while his 2009 memoir, Second Banana, offered an honest, balanced look at his years on Sanford and Son. The memoir was neither bitter nor boastful, instead acknowledging both joy and disappointment with grace. In 1984, Wilson fulfilled the promise he made as a child by becoming an ordained minister in the Church of God in Christ. Ministry became central to his identity, and he regularly appeared on faith-based programs while participating in religious theater and film projects. For Wilson, faith was not a retreat from the world, but a way of engaging it with compassion, humility, and purpose. Family, final years, and an enduring legacy. In 1974, Wilson married model Cicely Johnston, and together they raised 6 children, building a family life that grounded him through decades of public attention. He often described family as his greatest blessing, a source of stability that fame could never replace. In his later years, he balanced quiet living with continued service, remaining connected to faith-based projects and mentoring others when possible. Wilson passed away peacefully at his home in Palm Springs, California, at the age of 79, following complications related to cancer. His death marked the end of a life defined not by one role, but by consistency, humility, and service across many callings. He left behind more than memorable performances. He left an example of how to live with integrity in public and private. Grady Demond Wilson made people laugh, reflect, and believe. And though the screen has gone dark, his influence continues to shine.